What's up, good people? Welcome to another draft podcast. We only have two more. We got tight ends today. Next week, wide receivers. Then we're doing mock draft. So these are the second to last draft profile you're going to see from us. So welcome. We got a lot to talk about. But first, make sure you go and subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, join the Patreon, do all that good stuff because tomorrow we're going to be at the facility. More specifically, I'll be at the facility filling in for these guys. And then just look for the Discord. I'm sure we'll fill it in there, and you'll see it on Twitter. And I'm sure we'll have a podcast tomorrow as well, recapping everything that happened at phase 1 of training camp as we start mini camp right before the draft. So make sure you're following us over there, jump in the Discord, and be on the lookout for all that. So we got tight ends now. We kind of saved this towards the end of our kind of draft process because there's been a big debate on this first tight end that we're going to cover here, and the Chargers pick him at 5. So let's go ahead and start. Jamie's going to start us off right here. We're going to do five tight ends together. We'll each have a sleeper. But to start us off, Jamie, none other than Brock Bowers.
I feel like we're kind of burying the lead here, starting with Bowers, but at least I get to talk about him, so that worked out pretty well. So Bowers is obviously an extremely fun watch. There's a lot of things he does at a very high level. You talk about a guy who plays at, I mean, he's listed at 245. I kind of doubt he played at 245, but that's what he's listed at. He has explosive speed for his position. You see him consistently catching the ball in space and running away from people. He's highly effective in the screen game where he's able to make people miss and create yak after the catch. He also runs a very diverse NFL route tree. His routes are very crisp. Bowers runs nuanced routes. You can tell he understands leverage. There are times where he'll turn people around, get DBs to turn their back on him as he's going into his break. He's able to accelerate through all of his breaks. Bowers creates really easy separation at the top of his routes. He runs away from corners and safeties after the catch. Bowers has great feel for space and when he's open. As soon as he finds a space in the zone in particular, he will turn, put his hand up, show his numbers, front numbers, and present a big target. He knows when to extend his route, when to cut his route off. He works back to the football. There are a lot of very instinctive things that he does that you can tell he's just been well coached. I love the way he works back to the football. Very, very fun to watch. Bowers also has a very powerful lower half on a strong core, which can make him very difficult to tackle. Brock plays at all 3 levels of the field, makes plays at all 3 levels of the field, shows good willingness and technique as a blocker. I don't think he's a great blocker. I'm not sure he's going to be a great blocker, but at least he's willing to stick his nose in there and get dirty. Very natural hands catcher. He extends and plucks the ball out of the air. He high points the ball pretty much every chance he gets. No body catching here with Bowers. And he tracks the ball and has the body control to adjust the ball as he's running his route without throttling down, and just makes it look easy. Things for Bowers to work on are just areas that I noticed that aren't as sharp as maybe we've been led to believe. I think, the first thing with him is his frame. He's very narrow and has a very lean frame. I know he was listed as playing at 245. My guess is he probably played a little bit closer to 230 for most of his career. When he has to make contested catches, particularly in traffic, he does not do as good a job at boxing out as you would expect an elite tight end to do. Defenders frequently play through Bowers' frame and disrupt him at the catch point. He doesn't have ideal length for the position either, and his lack of length leads to a limited catch radius. He does not catch the ball as consistently outside of his frame. Or make contested catches as consistently as you'd want somebody at the top of the class. I think Bowers can be slow to identify blitzers as an inline blocker, particularly when he's the last man on the edge. He can be kind of slow to pick up the last man. I think he misses too many chips and second level blocks. Bowers, I think, lacks the play strength to be an effective inline blocker year one and maybe year two. He's a guy who he's going to get an NFL weight program and probably put some weight on, add some bulk, and get stronger. But right now, he's just not there. And there are times where it seems like he doesn't have the same intensity or vigor when he's running underneath routes. He doesn't sell them, doesn't run them as hard. He's definitely plays faster and more aggressively when he's looking at running routes down the field and he thinks he's going to make a big play. And he frequently allows defenders to cross his face as an inline blocker. So I think what we kind of need to talk about with Bowers is what does generational mean? What are we? How do we define generational? And is Bowers generational? In my opinion, he's a lot of fun. He's going to be a very good football player. I do not believe he's a generational prospect. I think the shortcomings as a blocker leave a little bit to be desired, and I think his struggles catching balls outside of his frame and making tough physical catches in traffic kind of limit his ability in terms of being a generational prospect. So he's my number one tight end. I have an 88 on him. He's going to wind up being probably in the top 10 to 12 picks. But I don't think he's generational, and I don't think that I think we've gotten a little caught up in some hyperbole talking about him to an extent. Not saying he's not going to be super productive, not saying he's not going to be great, but I just think there's a lot of hyperbole. We haven't seen him play in a while. He didn't test. And I think to some extent, the reputation exceeds the actual player slightly.
Greg?
So just to piggyback off of that a little bit, the term generational is kind of getting thrown around very loosely, like GOAT, same thing, like everybody's the greatest of all time with everything. Generational, I think Bowers is getting that tag because of the on-field production and what he does with the ball once he gets it in his hands in the open field. He's really able, and I'm trying my best not to repeat anything Jamie said because he pretty much covered all of the things that he does really well. But I think people are enamored with what he does with the ball in the open field because not very many tight ends do what he does. And I think one thing that makes him very special is that he has pretty decent acceleration, but his top speed catches defenders off guard. And you can see it when they take these really, really poor angles, underestimating how good his long speed really is. So I think people get caught up again in the numbers and the things that he was able to do. And you look at the numbers and the success he had and some of the really amazing things that he does on field, and it's easy to give him that tag. When I think generational, I think guys like Calvin Johnson, like really super freaky dudes who shouldn't be able to do the type of things that they do at their size and their height. Bowers is very exceptional. And I don't want to take anything away from him. He is probably a top 2 to 3 tight end that I've ever looked at. But again, we're looking at him in totality, not just as a traditional wide tight end, because he isn't that. So just to kind of go over a few of the things that I noticed with watching, Georgia really loves screwing with defenses by motioning him pre-snap. I believe it led to a bunch of busted coverages because there were plays where he would either be streaking up the seam or on a crosser. And based on how wide open he was, you would think the dude was equipped with like the Miles Morales spider camo ability. That's for you Marvel comic fans and nerds like myself. But it almost seemed like he was, and Jamie and I actually talked about this in text thread, mentioned it, that he was open way more often than you would think he should be, specifically playing against SEC teams. It wasn't that they were schemed improperly for him. Georgia just did a really good job at putting him in position to win, and teams just didn't react to it very well. He's as sure-handed as any wide receiver, let alone tight end in the class. So I want to say he had like 71 targets last year with just 3 drops. So really natural hands catcher, natural athlete overall. I think the versatility could lend to any style of offense also. He'll be an instant like matchup nightmare day one in the NFL as a primary split wide or an H-back. I mentioned it before. I call the dude Mr. Make It Happen after the catch, because you can't arm tackle him. You can't be lazy. You've got to line him up, square him up, and get your body and arms on him. Otherwise, trying to tackle him with his arms is complete exercise and futility. He runs angry and with a purpose. So just about everything that you want in a tight end, he encapsulates from an effort standpoint. I know Jamie mentioned that sometimes he doesn't look as engaged, but more often than not, he's given that type of effort, and he's playing to a level and running with the ball in his hands the way that a larger wide receiver would. Also notice that Georgia had a tendency to get him the ball on quicker routes. So let's say the crossers, screens, things to just manufacture touches for him because he's so special with the ball in his hands after the catch. So, yep, he has the ability to run routes, but I want to see what that looks like at the next level, because as fluid as he is an athlete, I don't think I saw enough of his route tree to feel super comfortable with him being able to do everything. But I don't have very much in the way of complaints about him, specifically even as a blocker. The effort is there. He does give up some size. That's going to be a little bit of a problem at the next level if you plan on playing him in line a bunch, which I don't think you should. But if he puts on some size, I think he'll be able to manage well. Is he strong for his size? Yeah. Also don't really know how that's going to translate to the next level as is. But like I said before, I don't necessarily think that you want him playing as a traditional inline wide. From like the 7 or 8 games that I watched, and I mentioned this a little bit, again, this kind of falls in line with some of the areas of improvement, or really just more of what I need to see from him at the next level. I just need to see more in the way of routes run. Again, I think it's more of a product of the way Georgia wanted to utilize him in that offense. But overall, I think he'll be able to manage well. I just didn't see enough, and maybe I can watch a few more games. Like I said, I did 7 or 8. I'll probably watch some more just to get a better feel of what his overall route tree looks like. And also, I didn't see him create a ton of separation as a route runner when defenses actually decided to cover him. So again, runs well, pretty adept in the open field, catches really well. My questions, even less about the blocking, are about his overall ability and I guess how well he's going to be able to run the full route tree at the next level, because this isn't going to be, like I said before, your typical wide receiver. He's going to be used as a weapon in the offense. So he's going to have to be able to do multiple things well. And it's going to have to be more than just at the first and second level of a defense. So I like Bowers a lot. I gave him a 91 overall. So it's a late first round grade. Not that far from Jamie's, so we're in the same neighborhood, but definitely the number 1 tight end in the class. And I think he just has to be put in the right situation in the NFL, but I can't see this kid busting. He just has the type of effort and ability that I think will translate as long as you're using him properly.
So, sorry, I'm just getting the grades together. There's not much more that we can really say on him. You guys kind of listed all the traits and all the good things about him. I think I will echo you guys' sentiment. It feels like as a blocker, the effort and the technique are good enough to get the job done. The lack of size obviously hurts him at times. And for me, sometimes that play strength hurts him in the run game. But I also like him blocking on the move more than playing him on the end. So having him as a Y isn't where he should be lined up, like Craig's talking about. But really, at the NFL level, it's all about the route running, the explosiveness, the yak ability, the strong hands, what everybody's talked about. I think the only knock you can really have on Bowers, in my mind, is about the size, and it's what gives him the explosiveness. So do you want him to put on some more muscle? Maybe you maybe take a little away from that, but he measured at 6'3", 243, by the way, Jimmy, at the combine. So that's where he's at right now. But I'm with Craig. I've got a 91. I cannot believe that you knocked him to 88, Jamie. I don't know how that happens. This is a good football player, but
I agree he's a good football player. I didn't say he wasn't.
But 88, he's not even a first round tight end to you, huh?
Or I mean, he's going to wind, like I said, he's going to wind up being in the top 12 to 15 grades in my draft class.
But he's not going to have a true first round grade like from Craig and I. So Craig and I 91, Jamie 88. So here's where we got to talk, because early on in the draft process, it was Brock Bowers at 5 for Chargers Twitter or die. Like everybody was ready to die on that hill. Since then, it feels like everybody's cooled on that. How are you guys feeling about Brock Bowers? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Harbaugh and his love for tight ends and Kittle and how he made that offense roll. How do you got even Vernon Davis, whatever? How do you feel about Brock Bowers in Harbaugh's offense? And quite honestly, how do you feel about it at number 5?
Well, I think first of all, remember it's not Harbaugh's offense; it's Roman's offense, and I think there's no doubt that he fits in that offense. Not as a Y, but I think that's why they went out and they signed Hurst and Disley. So he's, in my opinion, he's a hybrid or a flex tight end. He can do a little bit of everything, but he's a guy that you want kind of in the slot, maybe lined up out wide, in motion, have him blocking on the move, things like that. And with the way they scheme up plays for tight ends, with the kind of production that Roman got out of Mark Andrews in Baltimore, and what we saw him get with Isaiah Likely this year when Andrews went down, there's no doubt that I think Bowers fits in this offense, and he would be a solid source of big plays in this offense. At 5, I don't know about 5. If they trade back, like we've heard talk about them potentially trading back to 11, then I'd be more open to it. I'm just not sure that I don't know that I would spend 5 on a tight end, but if you were going to do it, he'd probably be the one to do it with.
He definitely fits a Greg Roman offense, and also when you consider the fact that the tight end, as a tight end, flex Y, split him out. He did all that at Georgia, play some outside receiver as well. If you're going to spend a 5th overall pick on a tight end, he has to be like a number 1 in your offense. And that's kind of sort of the way that Roman would use him. If you kind of look at the way Mark Andrews is being used in Baltimore as well, you can see he's quite frankly the number 1 passing option. I mean, now that they have Zay Flowers, there's a little bit more balance there. But when you're talking about a safety blanket or a player that they definitely scheme up touches for and targets to off of the run game, Mark Andrews has to be near the top of that list. So Bowers makes sense in that way. Not at 5 for me either, even if you just look at it from this standpoint, contractually. There are more premium positions that in a little while, as the Chargers go along, let's talk maybe like wide receivers throughout, like even, I'm not saying that they draft an edge rusher, I'm just throwing out some of those positions, the higher paid positions. You're going to start looking at contracts for those guys later on down the line, and they're going to be super expensive. You can find tight ends, even now, if you took a tight end, it would be cheaper, and he's going to be on the cheaper end of things when it comes time to pay him again. But for a wide receiver, I think you can get as much production out as you can from a top flight wide receiver and figure out what you're going to do with that contract maybe later on down the line, even if it's a player that you're willing to let walk. I feel like I wouldn't take a tight end that early because honestly, from a production standpoint, even if that does pan out, I just think contractually you probably need to focus on a more premium position. And then, again, if you're talking about trading back, I'm fine with that. Outside of the top 10, if the Chargers traded to 11, I wouldn't argue with that at all. I'd be fine with them there, just not at 5. I think there are better uses of that draft capital. And I honestly, if they were to do it, I would be a little shocked because I don't think they operate in that fashion. But it's not something I would do. If it happens, I can't wait to see what happens in our live draft show. I'm sure things are probably going to go a little nuts. We're going to be very conflicted and confused about how to feel. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody ends up breaking something. But with that being said, this is the type of player that from a production standpoint makes sense inside of the top 10. It's just the position that he plays that doesn't necessarily fall in line with that. Like, I said before, I like the dude a lot. Essentially, he's like Chris Cooley on the Super Soldier Serum to me. But, at 5, nah, I'll pass on that.
Yeah. Brock Bowers isn't a bad player, and I think everybody that's for Bowers at 5 gets a little offended when you say you don't want Bowers at 5. I mean, he's a good player. I'm not ready to take Bowers at 5. I've got a first round grade on him, but I think there's better draft capital spent that way. If they're falling out of the top 10, he's at the top of my board with probably a few other players. He's definitely in the discussion at that point. But I am not ready to draft Brock Bowers, knowing I get it that tight end room does need to improve, and getting Hurst and Disley is better than it was, but they need a true tight end one. We'll talk about some later on coming up here, but I don't like the direction of taking a tight end when you have some other premium positions that need to be filled with that high of draft capital at number 5. So I don't want Brock Bowers at 5. I like the player. I could convince myself that this was a good pick probably a day after just because it was made. But I don't think it makes sense from a positional standpoint, from a strategy standpoint. I get contractually, there's a big sticking point there too. But, it just feels like at 5, you're going to have one of the top 2 receivers there. If you're passing on both of those and you decide to go on to Brock Bowers, I think your draft strategy is a little off. So I do not like Brock Bowers at 5. You trade back, and he is at the top of my list.
Agree.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on. It is time. Craig, next up, the second guy on our list, Jatavion Sanders from Texas.
Whoop-de-doo.
Yay.
Okay, so if you guys couldn't tell from, I guess, my mannerisms, facial expressions, I am not a huge Jatavion Sanders fan. I see that he's ranked rather highly amongst the consensus, which, there are certain things that help me to understand it, but it also tells me a whole lot about this class in general, because this dude doesn't know what he wants to be, and it shows up on film. He's in between a wide receiver and a tight end, and he seems like he's in the middle of an identity crisis, trying to figure out what he wants to be. Like, he looks and moves like an out of position wide receiver, more so than a traditional tight end. And I think that served him well, because defenders often had a really hard time sizing him up like early in games. I was pleasantly surprised by his ability to be a good contested catch guy, because he isn't the most physical tight end. I'm putting that mildly. He's not very physical at all, but still, in a contested catch situation for a guy that's not necessarily put together that way, he handled himself pretty well. Texas lined him up a bunch in line, which a bunch, like to the tune of 60% of his snaps. And that really helped them exploit like defenses at the second and third level by attacking those seams. This was also used as a tactic to free up like Xavier Worthy and AD Mitchell on crossers, so Sanders can like generate enough respect and attention to be a solid decoy at the next level too. He did have 0 drops on nearly 70 targets last year, so you got to respect that type of production. And he flashed better overall effort in the run game year over year, so from 22 to 23. So there's that. You saw better effort. Now, as far as the things that he needs to work on, let's start with actually being a tight end. Let's start there. But he looks like he's trying, again, to figure out the position still. He's almost unsure, like I mentioned before, what he wants to be. And the route running looks like a little quirky. It's a combination between like both positions. Like, he's a little herky-jerky in his routes when he's playing out wide or split wide. And on the interior, he doesn't run them with enough force to generate enough effort and speed behind it as a tight end. It's just, he doesn't fit any position to a T to me. He doesn't really possess the demeanor to be a traditional inline wide tight end either, even though Texas chose to square peg round hole him there. And there's no mean streak to the dude at all. Like, I'll give him credit for being more of an attacking blocker, like I mentioned last year, over 22, but that's before I basically have to undercut the compliment by gut punching his technique, because it's virtually like non-existent. He really struggles to square guys up in the open field before he attaches to them. And oftentimes he'll just like tuck his helmet into his shoulder and lunge forward, like not even seeing what he's attempting to hit. It's really frustrating from a physical standpoint, and looking at a guy that you're expecting to be more of a force, whether you're going to use him on the interior as a Y or even as a split Y. Like, you're going to have to get in there and get dirty in the blocking game. You're not just going to go out there and catch passes. I mean, I get that the NFL is more leaning towards guys like this to utilize them more in the passing game and less blocking, but it's just you still have to be able to develop that and have that in your bag, especially if you're going to be used in line at all, or else you become a huge liability. No drops, as I mentioned before, but he doesn't necessarily qualify as like a natural hands catcher to me. He looks really like a fish out of water when he's tracking the deep ball over his shoulder. There were a couple catches that he made where I was just surprised he was able to hold on to it. Like he just corrals it. It doesn't look like he practices that at all. And it just doesn't fit like the mold of what you would consider a receiving tight end. When he has the ball in front of him, he can look it into his hands. It looks okay. But when we're talking about tracking the ball, it's hit or miss. So again, like I said before, didn't love him. I know a lot of people out there do, but I'm just keeping it a buck with you. I gave a dude a 74. So talking what, mid third round. And I mean, I tried. I watched them a bunch of times. I really wanted to see what everybody else did, but man, I can't lie to y'all, man. It would be doing a disservice to y'all, and I'm a really bad liar. So unfortunately, I can't help y'all there. 74 it is.
Consensus tight end 2. Yeah, that's how far of a drop it is in this tight end class. But another undersized tight end like Craig's talking about. He does part of the reason, and this is maybe where I start to give him excuses, and then I quickly fall off. But he's 20, so there is reason to believe there's some room to grow, and he's fairly green to the position. Had some nice stats at Texas. He had over 600 yards receiving back-to-back seasons, and I think his hands look pretty good in traffic, which was very surprising to me too. But most of his production, the more you watch Texas, the more you realize it is all scheme based. It is all about misdirection that Texas runs. They leak Sanders out past like a flat-footed DB or linebacker. He's got an open window, and it's real easy to get him open and some extra yards, because as a route runner, he is clunky. His footwork will have to absolutely like ascend to be anywhere close to a good tight end at the next level. This just feels like a guy that is going to be a project and is going to need at least a season or two before he's NFL ready. He's not big enough. He's not strong enough. His footwork is not good enough. And I didn't see a big route tree, and what he did, it just did not look good enough. So for me, I've got a 70 on him. So I'm a little bit lower than Craig, but I can't get with it. He is not my tight end 2, 3, 4, 5, or I think even 6 at this point. He was a really frustrating and tough watch for a guy who was kind of labeled as this athletic, next close to Brock Bowers tight end type player. This is not him. Ja'Tavion Sanders is kind of on my list of not a fan. And if they drafted him, even if it was, in the third round, I don't know I can get behind it.
Yeah, him garbage. He's bad.
Cool.
I have a 70 on him as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I had a hard time finding things that I liked about him, to be totally honest. He's effective in the seams, and in the intermediate passing game. They threw, like Garrett mentioned, a lot of misdirection. There were a lot of tight end screens for him to give him a chance to rumble in space, which he was pretty good at. He flashes the ability to separate from man coverage. I think he kind of surprises safeties and linebackers with his speed a little bit and is able to break away from guys at times. It's not consistent, but it happens. He does high point the ball. He's got a very long frame, so he's good at catching the ball outside of his frame. He has flashes as an inline blocker. He, like I mentioned, he has a pretty decent ability to create after the catch. And he has the frame and the length to be a contested catch guy. I think the flip side of that is, like Craig mentioned, he is not physical. I did not really see the contested catches with him. I saw defenders really playing through him quite a bit. There were times where he felt linebackers or safeties coming down on him, and he short arm passes and let balls go through his hands. He doesn't seem to have really much interest at all in blocking. At the second level, he'll kind of tippy toe into his blocks when he's asked to pull and climb. Like Craig mentioned, his go-to as a blocker is he'll turn his shoulder. He'll turn sideways tuck his chin into his chest and turn his shoulder into a defender instead of taking them on head on. He allows blockers to slip past him all the time, struggles finding moving targets. He has a hard time protecting the ball after the catch. I think he had 2 fumbles in the Bama game alone. And while he did have 600 plus yards this year, half of them came in 3 games. So he was not consistent. And it seemed like once he had that breakout game against Alabama, teams kind of figured him out and they bullied him and picked on him and were really physical with him. And he was just not able to answer the bell. So I have a 70 on him. He's a guy that I want no part of. Even at a 70, 3rd round, 4th round. I mean, I think there's just way too much fixing to be done there. Not interested.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a good fit for the Chargers either, not just because we don't like the player, but I mean, I don't feel like he's ready to contribute right away. He isn't tough enough in the run game or at the catch point to really help in Harbaugh's system. It just feels like in terms of a fit in Roman and or Harbaugh's system, this isn't his guy.
Seems like more of a finesse spread offense type of tight end. Someone who's going to be used in space more often than not. So definitely not what the Chargers are looking to do.
All right, let's move on then. Sorry, I thought you were going to add something, Jamie.
Nope.
All right, let's move on to tight end 3 on this list. Third one we're going to cover today, and it is Cade Stover from Ohio State. This kid is a vacuum. I mean, anything thrown his way, he's catching it. He's got natural hands. He recorded 0 drops in 41 targets last season. He's got a real muscular frame. It's NFL ready. It helps him win in traffic. Also helps him in the run game as a nasty blocker. He was a former edge in high school, and he was also an edge rusher when he first got to Ohio State. He made the switch to tight end in 2020. He's been a tight end ever since. So he has a real nasty streak as a blocker, which I love. Real nice feel for the field. He sinks his hips in open spaces, sets up defenders to get to his spot. While he might not be a high-end athlete at the position, he is a natural route runner, has a real good get-off at the line of scrimmage. And after that, though, not much to offer you. He's not going to blow the top off any defense. He is still growing at the position because he just switched over to tight end, but he's going to be an older rookie. He's going to be 24. So that's going to be a knock on him going into this process. Isn't going to add an explosive type element to your offense, but he has all the makings of kind of being a quiet, dependable starter with some blocking ability, reliable hands. It just made me think of that kind of mold of like a Heath Miller or like more recent, like a Tyler Higbee, where it's like, they're not going to blow you out of the water. They're not going to get you a ton of fancy points. You're probably not even going to draft them, but a reliable enough weapon when you need them on those gotta-have-it downs. Cade Stover could be one of your guys to help move the chain. So for me, I've got a 75 on Cade Stover, kind of a quiet, reliable, nice tight end option here. I liked Cade Stover a lot more than I thought I was. And I actually had to stop because I thought, do I like him more because I just got finished watching Sanders? And then I went and watched some Sanat. Wait, I like him too. Wait. Okay, hold on. So I went back to Stover, and finished my grading and everything. So I've got a 75 on him. A nice little option here.
Yeah, I like Stover quite a bit too. I'm actually a little higher on him than you are. I thought
nice.
Stover, in my opinion, I thought he was the best blocker in the class. He's just tough and physical and rugged, plays low and behind his pads, good hand placement, generates power from his lower half. All good things blocking. He's athletic enough to execute as a puller and at the second level. From a receiving standpoint, his hands are really natural. Like Garrett mentioned, if you throw it anywhere near him, he's going to catch it. He has the length and the ability, the body control to be able to catch balls outside of his frame. I think he's really good with the ball in his hands after the catch too, which kind of surprised me. He's got pretty loose hips. He uses a stiff arm to create contact or create after the catch. Stover, I think he runs people over. He'll run over and through defenders to get extra yards. Really makes people work to bring him down. The footwork is better than I expected as a route runner. He creates consistent separation. and he's a former basketball star, recruited as a linebacker who also played edge. So he, like Garrett mentioned, there's plenty of room to improve, and he elevates easily for jump balls. I think sometimes some of the knocks on him, because he's learning the position, he has to throttle down sometimes when he's locating the ball in the air. His release packages can be a little awkward at times just because he's still learning the footwork. Stover is sometimes late off the ball. Contact balance every once in a while could be a little bit of an issue. He doesn't so much make people miss in space as he runs through them. And he's going to have to get stronger and refine his blocking technique. But I enjoyed him, and I think I had a kind of a similar experience. I watched him after watching Sanders, and was like, wow, this guy's good. I really like him. I wound up with an 82 on him.
Oh, wow.
And, I freely admit that might be some post-Sanders hangover that influenced that. But I like Stover. I think he's going to be a good player, and he's a guy who I think you should start looking at late round 2, early round 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you definitely had your fill of Sanders. So I like Cade Stover also. I didn't watch him in the same order, so maybe I didn't have as much of. I mean, I definitely don't like Sanders, but I don't think it made me like Stover that much more. Couple things about him that I do appreciate. Former defender, he played both defensive end and linebacker, so he kind of brings like that hard-nosed grinder effort to the tight end position. Moves pretty well in space as a blocker. He doesn't really struggle to line up defenders, and he stays attached to them once he makes contact. I think he projects more of like a solid H to me at the next level. If you told me he played a bit more in line, I could see it, but I think that there's something there for him as an H. You can see his growth as a route runner, even though he isn't like the most athletic guy. You see him working on finer points of route running, specifically like at the top of his routes to help create separation, because since he's not a fantastic athlete, he has to win a little bit more with nuance. And I think the 23 tape definitely shows some growth there. He's taking the position seriously and looking to add to his bag there. 51 targets last year and no drops. And I think he only had 2 like his entire time as a Buckeye. So another sure-handed receiving option in the passing game. And he has the potential to be one of those chain movers in a run-heavy offense. I think he could fit really well there. As far as some of the things that maybe can be seen as knocks against him, like I mentioned before, not an explosive athlete. I don't think he has like any clear defined physical traits. So what exactly are your expectations going to be from him offensively from an overall production standpoint is like my biggest question about him. He's a better run blocker than pass blocker right now at this point, but it's not really due to technique. He's just pretty limited in his lower half, and he struggles to maintain his base against guys that are more powerful than he is. And he's probably more of a high floor than a high ceiling guy. So he's safe, but I don't know about being like a consistent difference maker. But I mean, I'm saying all that, it sounds like I'm not really high on him, but I actually do like Cade Stover. I gave him a 75, so I'd say a mid-third round grade. I think, Garrett, didn't you give him a 75?
Yep.
Also?
Same,
okay,
yeah.
So right there.
Yeah, but for me, a really good fit for the Chargers. It feels like he's ready to contribute right away. He has that muscular build. I feel like Herbert could really build on blocking ability in the run game, dependable hands, like Craig mentioned, like a high floor contributor, almost like a transition package for some of these other tight ends, because he's kind of got a little bit of Disley, kind of a little bit of a Hurst in him. And if those guys don't end up working out, this could be an easy, feels like maybe a low end tight end 1, but an easy tight end 2 in an offense right away.
Yeah, agreed.
His ability to block and catch and make plays after the catch, I think, all well on this offense.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to Ben Sinnott. Jamie?
Yeah, so Sinnott's another guy who I really enjoyed. Again, possibly some post-Sanders hangover, but I think so. Stover, I think I forgot to mention this when I talked about him before, Stover, but I think it goes for Sinnott too, is both these guys, I think it's easy to see Harbaugh looking at them and just saying, damn, that's a football player. Like, they just do, they don't stand out at any one thing, but they do a lot of things really well. To me, Sinnott he's a hybrid tight end. who can do a little bit of everything. He lines up in line, offset, fullback, H-back, slot, out wide, and at running back. He's very savvy, and he's a well-coached blocker. K-State almost always ran behind Sinnott. If they really needed a yard, short yardage in the red zone, whatever, they almost always ran behind him as either an inline blocker, a puller, or a lead blocker as a fullback. And it almost always worked out to their advantage. Sinnott takes patient angles, understands how to position himself to seal off defenders. I thought he excelled at the second level. He creates power with his legs, and he's able to execute just about any kind of block. I think from a receiving standpoint, Sinnott has really loose hips and light feet, and he runs professional routes. There are several times where I saw him turn defenders around in deep and intermediate passing. He catches pretty much everything thrown to him. Sinnott creates separation versus man coverage, and he also understands how to find voids in zone. Sinnott extends and places and plucks the ball out of the at the highest point. He makes contested catches. Very effective at all three levels of the defense. He creates yak. He's very difficult to tackle. Is able to slip blocks and run guys over. And he was deployed really creatively in the red zone, which is something I really liked. I saw play action jump passes to him. I saw him running slants and fades in the red zone. I saw him get a couple carries in the red zone, and all of it worked. And I specifically remember watching him at one point thinking, God, it's only a matter of time before they throw him a shovel pass or run the ball with him in the red zone. And like 5 plays later, they threw him a shovel pass and he ran it in for a touchdown. So lots of fun to watch. And I think he's going to be a better receiving weapon in the NFL than he was in college, just because he's going to play in a pro-style offense, and that Kansas State offense was not really meant to sling the ball around the yard. In terms of negatives or weaknesses, he's probably too small to consistently play in line, although he was effective in that role in college. Sinnott could stand to sharpen his routes on a more consistent basis. There are times where he'll round his routes off a little bit. His frame is probably maxed out, so he's not going to get a whole lot bigger or stronger. Sinnott can be a little slow to get his hands out when the ball is on him before he's expecting it. And he lacks elite speed, but I think he outplays his 40 time on the field. He just seems to play fast. And he's going to need to continue to add functional strength as a blocker. So I like Sinnott. I had an 80 on him. He's a guy who I think is going to be a very solid, like fullback, H-back, hybrid tight end who could do a little bit of everything in the offense and be kind of a secret weapon in the red zone.
All right. Craig?
Yeah. So toughness and effort personified. So for everything he may not have in overall strength and athleticism, Sinnott more than compensates for it in heart. Just gives it all almost every play. Sneakier athlete than what sometimes shows up on tape. K-State used him in line as an H in the slot, a little bit of everything. And he never really looked out of place anywhere. I watched a fair amount of him by way of my personal interest in Deuce Vaughn's career, but I never really realized how explosive Sinnott looked in short areas. His acceleration in his first few steps of his routes is pretty impressive. It hadn't caught my eye before because I wasn't necessarily looking for it, but after rewatching tape and just kind of focusing in more so on him, it definitely stood out. What he lacks in functional strength as a lead blocker, he makes up for in technique. So he almost always meets defenders with the appropriate low center of gravity. And he also understands how to explode from his hips into his target. So you can see that's something that he's worked on. He's kind of got that fullback vibe to him, but also you can see him utilizing it as a tight end, especially in line where he's not the greatest, but he's still serviceable. As a receiver, I say he's extremely adept at attacking zone defenses, like settling down in the open windows, and he creates like really easy pitch and catch throws for the QB. And he actually produces at a pretty high clip with yards after catch as well. I think he averaged like 14 yards per catch each of the last 2 years. So dude gets it done when he gets his hands on the ball. As far as some of the knocks, functional strength to operate as a traditional inline Y isn't really there, at least not consistently. And he's got shorter arms, I believe, and he can definitely be taken advantage of by defenders that can best him in that area. So if he fails to get hands on them first, he can get out leveraged, and then he'll find himself kind of being a liability in the run game or amounting to little more than like a speed bump for edge rushes and pass protection. He did test pretty well at the combine, surprisingly so, because like I said before, on field, he looks sort of athletic, but not necessarily to the tune of where his numbers showed up. I mean, like, I think he had over a 40-inch vert. As far as the 40 goes, have to double check, but I know he was sub 4.7. I think he was in the 4.6, low 4.6 range, somewhere around there. So he can definitely move. But I don't know that the tape consistently backed it up. He's probably, like I mentioned before, more explosive in short areas, and it actually tapers off beyond like the intermediate areas of the field. So it really shows up in his lack of ability to separate vertically. So again, really good second level guy, but you can kind of see where the limitations lie as he moves further down the field, especially if he has to run deeper routes. He's got pretty decent hands. I wouldn't say great or elite, but dependable. So again, as far as Senate goes, I like them. Really, I like him a lot. I like him better than Jatavian Sanders, which is going to be a common theme here, and gave him a 77. So early third round guy for me.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to like about him. And I think he started to get the buzz, and he ran a 4.68, by the way. And he had a 9.92 vertical.
What, broad?
Or a 40 vertical, a 10.6 broad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that 9 sounded low.
9.92. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've got my numbers mixed up there. But
a 9-foot vertical would be something.
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? I was looking at the RAS grade, which was right next to it. The RAS was the 40-inch vertical was a 9.92, which is elite. But he is athletic and undersized, but I do feel like some of that might be a little misleading when it's on the field, because I feel like the change of direction at times hurts him. And I feel like when he gets the ball in his hands, he's not a quick get up the field type tight end. So I don't see that really translating, but I mean, he's obviously got a lot of athleticism, because at every level, he's a threat, and he can climb the ladder, high point anything in his area. Really good catch radius. I love the nuance in his route running, the kind of head fakes and some wiggle with the ball in his hands. I like that a lot. Like you guys mentioned, he lined up as a fullback, an H-back. So he's really willing to do anything. And I agree with Jamie. It feels like these last two guys are kind of do it all, whatever you ask of me type guys. And those feel like Harbaugh guys. You guys didn't mention, and this to me is the biggest knock on Senate, is 34 is very unappealing for a jersey number. That is an aesthetic nightmare for a tight end.
Is that a deal breaker?
And that's a huge red flag, Craig.
Oh, man.
And I don't know why you guys aren't talking about it. I hated having to look out for 34 on tape. That was brutal, dude. I hated it. But you know, he's a guy that feels like he could really line up anywhere. You probably don't want to play him in line too much, but he does feel like that movable piece that you can have in the backfield, line out wide. He's a willing blocker. He can still improve in that area, but he's got enough today in his bag and some room to grow. I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue for him, especially the way he tested. I've got a 74 on him, which is a little bit lower than you guys, but it feels like this is a kind of kid that's ready to contribute right away. And also get Ben Herbert on him. Let him build him up and create a real high ceiling with this kind of dude. Right attitude, willing to play anywhere, do anything. I think this is a really good fit.
I mean, like I said, for what he doesn't have athletically, he's got the heart. So I have no doubt that he would get in there and put in the type of effort necessary in that strength program and maybe tighten himself up there and be a little bit more of a factor as a blocker, even though, like I said before, he's not really someone who's going to hurt you there. But if you want to use him more in line as a Y, he's going to have to get a little bit stronger in that lower half.
All right, let's do our last tight end here. It's number 5. Last one on our list before we each give a sleeper. And the chat's going to like our sleepers because they've mentioned them a couple times. Craig, this is you. Let's talk about Theo Johnson at Penn State.
Man, this is what a traditional inline wide tight end looks like. He's probably best suited of the bunch to translate to that spot at the next level. The overall size and length make him a problem to deal with in the run game. I mean, he's 6'6", and can and does often still win the leverage game. Sometimes the taller guys have a hard time with that. When he doesn't wash defenders out of plays, he'll neutralize them, and he does a pretty quality job at staying attached to help sustain those open lanes for running backs. Solid in double team situations and as a chipper in pass blocking, and he can anchor pretty well in one-on-ones also. He's a nightmare that can really climb the ladder as a receiver also. That near 40-inch vert. Again, we're talking about 6'6" with that, type of explosion. And he looks to bully at the catch point. Now, we're going to talk about something else here in a bit, but the effort is there. You still see that on tape. But there's something that works a little bit against him. He has the potential to be multifaceted. When we're talking about being a traditional Y, a split Y, or an H, I feel just fine with him being deployed in any one of those roles at the next level, especially once he has a little bit more work or he's working with a professional tight end coach, because he's a little bit of one of those unmolded clay guys, but you see the ability there. Dude kind of turns into the juggernaut after the catch, man. He seems to like initiate contact. He wants it. He welcomes it, which is cool in the film room for like tough guy points, but he has enough athleticism to make people miss, and I think he should utilize that a little bit more. He's one of my top options for this new offense from a developmental standpoint, because he has all the tools to be a very, very good blocker and the vertical speed and size to win as a seam stretcher. So again, just all the raw ability makes perfect sense for the offense. Now, because he's also very raw, and some of that has to do with Penn State. I mean, that offense is stale and boring and all of the things that you just don't love to watch in football. He's still very much so a work in progress as a receiver and a route runner. The hands are, to put it kindly, suspect. So what I talked about before with regards to him attacking the ball at its highest point, it's an effort thing, but the hands are still just kind of like hit or miss. He only had 2 drops last year, but he still looks like he's slap boxing when he's trying to catch the pill. So it ain't pretty. It's literally a little cringy at times. Separation really isn't his thing at all. He isn't the most loose athlete, so he'll round off routes like outs and digs, and that pretty much allows defenders recovery opportunities and to jump into passing lanes. With the type of numbers that he put up at the combine, his overall athletic profile, I'm curious as to why Penn State didn't allow him to be more of a vertical threat. I mean, 6'6", 260, 40-inch vert, runs 4.5. I think I saw maybe like 2 vertical routes in 6 games. Just inexplicable. I don't really get it. He's a better inline blocker than in space. He'll sometimes struggle to find work if his assignment doesn't really clearly present itself. And for such an elite tester, I can't say that I consistently saw that type of athlete on tape. He sometimes looks like he's lumbering, and he's clearly thinking. He's not necessarily just being a natural athlete and out there and performing at the highest level that he possibly can. It feels like he's still trying to learn the position. But for everything that he has, just from the build to the athlete that he is, again, this is somebody that you can put in an offense like the Chargers, and he's going to be a player that can produce from day one at the very least as a blocker. And if you can leak him out and get him the ball in his hands in the short area and allow him to kind of utilize that, hunter mentality once he has the ball in his hands, that'll work too. But I like Theo Johnson. There's just a lot of work that needs to be done. So I have him right now as an early 4th, late 3rd round guy with the 69.
Oh man, Jamie?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Craig said. I have a 71 on Johnson. I think there are some things to like. I think he flashes the ability to be a good blocker. I don't think it's super consistent, but it's there. He also flashes, I think, the ability to be a good route runner. Again, not polished, and it's not consistent, but because of his athleticism and his explosiveness, there is that opportunity for him to become a good route runner. He just hasn't been developed at all. Johnson will flash the ability to create movement in the run game. Got a decent anchor as a pass protector and a run blocker. His ability to make plays in short and intermediate passing games. Like Craig mentioned, he wasn't really used as a deep threat as much as you would have thought he would have been. He can be difficult to stay with over the middle of the field. And like Craig mentioned, he's got an NFL ready frame. He's a big, strong dude, and he's kind of that unpolished diamond in a lot of ways. I think the things that bothered me as a blocker, he has a tendency to duck his waist, bend at the waist, duck his head, and reach for run blocks at times. The feet and hands don't work together, and his feet will stall out as a blocker. Allows too many defenders to cross his face. He'll need to improve at sustaining and finishing blocks. Frequently looks like he's moving at half speed in all phases of the game. It just doesn't look like he's really sure of what he's supposed to be doing. Johnson is a natural body catcher, which we all know I do not like. He especially tries to trap the ball against his body on the move, which can be frustrating. The hands are inconsistent. He is not really able to make people miss or break tackles after the catch all that frequently. He's laid off the ball and to his blocks when he's asked to pull. He lacks the awareness to work back to the ball when the QB is in trouble, and he'll drift through voids in zone defense instead of camping out. Like I said, I have a 71, which is a late third, early fourth round pick. Johnson is like the traits guy, right? He's a guy who you see the size, you see the athleticism, you see the length, you see the potential, but he is not yet the sum of his parts. Right now, he's just a bunch of pieces that somebody needs to kind of put together. So I have a 71 on him.
Yeah. It's, when you see a tight end have the second best performance from a tight end ever at the combine, some GMs are lighting up, but I feel like, like everybody's talking about, the traits are there, the frame is there. I feel like the hands are good at the line of scrimmage. The route running needs some fixing, and I just don't know what you do about the hands. I mean, you have to basically start over with him. I mean, he is inconsistent from a down to down basis. The mechanics are good up until they hit his hands and or chest. And I know he's got a great story. Kim was talking about it. He can move. I feel like he has a nice feel for finding open spaces, but I don't feel like he gets open very often with his route running. And I just don't know that you can keep him on the field as a reliable option down to down. I know that he's just know that he's going to be a work in progress. I've got a 73 on him, which is higher than you guys. But what feels like to me for the Chargers in terms of a fit, the athleticism is there. He has the capability, at least the traits, to be a good tight end, and the ceiling is very, very high. But you just have to know that you can fix those hands. You have to draft him knowing that he's going to be very frustrating very early on in his career, if not throughout his whole career. You have to improve his hands, or else he's not going to be able to play on the football field. And so this to me isn't a great fit. I feel like from a blocking standpoint, he's got the frame and will win with strength at times, but I don't feel like it's as consistent as it should be. So I feel like the hands are inconsistent. The blocking is inconsistent. The traits are there. The speed's there. He can fly. But for me, in terms of a fit, it's a good looking Y tight end when you get him in pads. But when you start to play, I don't know. It doesn't feel like a great fit for me.
I think you'd have to take him mid to late day 3 to be comfortable with him, knowing you're going to stash him and spend time with him in the weight room and on the side fields working on everything. Because, with some of these guys, it's the blocking or it's the route running, or, it's one thing that you can point to and say, this needs to be polished up and he'll be fine. I feel like with Johnson, it's everything. And like you said, it's down to down. It's not even game to game.
Yeah.
Every down, it's something else that pops up, and you can't count on him. And they already went through that with QJ last year. And granted, first round pick, third, fourth, fifth round pick, there's a difference there. And maybe you have a little bit more patience with a guy who you draft a little bit later, but it's everything. And I don't know, with the state of the tight end room, I don't know that you can afford to take him unless you're going to try to stash him on the practice squad or something.
Thank you, Jamie, for saying that. So I didn't want to have to mention QJ at all.
I mean, it's hard to have that conversation about Johnson and not have it and not mention QJ because it's the hand, especially with the hands. It's very similar issues. You can't ignore it.
Well, I mean, this is about the area where you would take a project that you need to work on, mainly one of the primary things that he has to do in order to play his position. It's definitely not something you really want to spend first round draft capital on. I understand we're talking about different positions, but still, I agree with you. I think Theo has all of the traits to be someone who could potentially be a high level contributor, particularly in this type of offense. You want this guy playing in a gap power offense. Absolutely. He's got everything that you need if you wanted to build a guy to play the role. Now, all the nuance and particulars, he's going to have to put the work in there. But I think that's worth a late third round, early fourth round pick, especially if you have guys ahead of him that can at least be serviceable while he grows.
I guess the question for me is value and contributions, because if the team's talking about potentially double dipping at wide receiver. So if you're talking about, just to throw a name out there, like a Jacob Cowing or I was going to say Johnny Wilson, but I don't want that, but we'll talk about that in another show. But I mean, if you're talking about a wide receiver who can step on the field and you know he's going to catch the ball and he's going to make plays and he's going to contribute right away, versus a tight end who might need a year or two before he's even ready to be on the field, I'm not sure this team is in a position to be taking a full-on developmental project in the third or fourth round. They kind of need to hit on their first 4 picks at a minimum in this draft, in my opinion, after what we just went through for the last couple of years.
Either that, or you need to trade back and accumulate multiple picks. One of the two.
Sure.
Well, both?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Or either one.
Yeah. All right. Let's go in the sleepers. I'll go ahead and take over here since it's my turn now. So my sleeper here, somebody brought it up in the chat. People have mentioned it before. It is Eric All. It is the Iowa tight end. So Eric All, and a lot of these sleepers, you go, they're going on. I like them a lot more than the consensus, and they're going under the radar, and I don't know why. It's pretty clear why Eric All's going under the radar. He had 2 major injuries. He missed 2 full seasons of football. But as a football player, this is a kid you bet on. He is versatile enough to line up anywhere. He did in college. He wins with his footwork at the line of scrimmage, ran a full route tree in college. All is an athlete that can stretch the field or snap off defenders at the second level. He is a seam killer. I love him in the seams. When All gets the ball in his hands, he's a tough guy to bring down. He uses his frame to box out defenders, uses it to his advantage as a blocker. In traffic, Eric All shows off a wide catch radius and strong hands, though he did have a few concentration drops in college. He is a former Michigan Wolverine, so he was with Jim Harbaugh for 4 seasons, but he transferred this past season to Iowa. There were some cryptic tweets from All about leaving Michigan. His dad and his brother said some bad things about the coaching staff. It was not pretty. So I'm not quite sure where they stand, although during the combine interviews, Eric All did say that he loved Harbaugh and he loved his time at Michigan. He just needed a change. And so maybe things have settled down. I'm not sure, but Eric All has some real serious injury concerns. I think he needs to refine his blocking mechanics. I think they're pretty good, but I think they could be better. But the ability is all there if the medical's clear. If they don't, I understand doing having him fall to late round, even being a UDFA at that point, because 2 major injuries is scary. And one he described as a life-altering surgery. So pretty serious stuff there. But he got the all clear. He didn't test, but they said he's going to be ready during the season. He is a strong route runner. He's a threat at every level. He has strong yak ability. His skill set, to me, without the injuries, he's very close to being tight end 2 in this class if he just were to stay healthy. But he doesn't. So that's why he's falling. I've got a 73 on him. which is a mid third round grade. This has a tight end 1 upside in an offense. He was a Harbaugh guy, so he's very familiar with them. This would be a very good fit for the Chargers. I love his game. If only he could stay healthy.
Yeah, I watched all 2. I think there's a lot of things to like about him. A lot of the traits, like you mentioned, the frame is great. He flashes the ability to run really good routes. He makes tough physical catches. Really good after the catch. Tough to tackle. Good change of direction.
A butt's coming.
Untapped ability to make plays at all levels of the defense, and shows the ability to high point the ball and make contested catches. I think something about all was bothering me watching the tape. And obviously he had the injuries, which is a big deal, particularly the back injury. But I think the thing that stood out to me after kind of processing it was it's WrestleMania weekend, so I'm going to throw out a wrestling term. I feel like all has ring rust. Like, he strikes me as a guy who doesn't trust his body to handle the physical nature of the game. There are times where he looks a little timid in traffic. He just seems like there are times where he'll pull up short of contact when he's expecting a hit. It's like he's inhibited by the hits and the contact that he thinks is coming, but he can't see. And I think it's because he doesn't trust his body. So there are things that I like about him, and he's a guy that I think would be a really fun kind of stash and develop guy later, if you can get him later. I couldn't give him anything higher than a 4th round grade because I just feel like the injury thing is a big deal. And there were just some things about the way he reacted to contact and traffic, and it just seemed like he was really trying to protect his body a lot of times, that I think his mind and his body kind of need to be rebuilt, in my opinion. And he could be a good guy for Ben Herbert to get his hands on and kind of rebuild from the ground up. But he's going to need some time. And even then, he might not really realize his full potential if he doesn't learn how to trust his body. So just based on the injury issues and based on some of that ring rust, I have a 63 on him. And it's not that I didn't like him. It was just that I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what things look like for him at the next level from a mental standpoint. And I'm a little worried about that.
Are you talking about specifically the Iowa tape this past season?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't agree with that at all. He had a really productive season. I didn't feel that, but I hear what you're saying. Craig, you watched him?
Yeah. So it's weird because Jamie was in my head a little bit.
Here we go. You two were like, I don't know what's going on with you guys.
You can't fight the mind meld, man. It happens.
I got 2 Jamies on the podcast now. Hey. Jamie and Craig are now one person.
Don't do that. We disagree on something.
No, of course you do. I know.
But anyway, so
we've agreed on grades more than you and Jamie have.
Yeah. Jamie said ring rust. I said that, like, literally in my notes. I put he looked shell shocked. Like, there were instances where it seemed like he was anticipating contact before it was there. And I couldn't quite figure out, like, why does he seem so timid? And it makes perfect sense. If it's a mental thing and it's the injuries, then you've definitely got to put some work into that. And that is more than just the physical aspect of things. That's something that he needs to dial into, however he can figure that out. But in a game where you're typically risking injury when you're not going all out, you can't consistently do that. I liked almost everything about Eric All from an on-field and production standpoint. Yeah, the hands were a little bit of a thing. There were some concentration drops. I think he had like 4 last year. But overall, his game, I think, fits really well in a multitude of offenses, and even this one in particular. But he's got some work to do to kind of get things cleared up for production on the field, to get just kind of out of his own head. And I'm not trying to be a guy up here assessing someone's mental state. I don't know what's going on with them, but I'm just speaking to what I saw on tape. There were some instances where it looked like he was anticipating contact before it was there, and where there may have been like an extra 2 or 3 yards he could have gotten out of a play, just got killed on contact because he's basically stopped his own momentum. So I liked all of that. outside of the injuries and whatever else is going on, I definitely had him as a third round guy, and I gave him a 71. So, like I said before, I definitely like him. And hopefully he's somebody that they can get their hands on potentially later on and develop him moving forward, because the skill is there. He just has to work on some other things, and I think he can still be very highly productive.
All right. Since
Yeah,
you're here,
I just
go
wanted
ahead.
to add real quick. You guys mentioned concentration drops. I didn't feel like they were concentration drops. I thought they were anticipating contact drops. That was kind of how I saw some of those drops, like in traffic, somebody bearing down on him, and just kind of, I don't know, didn't
Well, I
react to
mean,
it very well.
that's still concentration. You're not focusing on catching the ball. You're concentrating on the contact. So
Fair.
I mean, it
That's
still
fair.
kind of falls in the same area, I guess.
All right, Craig, we got a special question for you.
Larry, my
Thoughts
man.
on TCU tight end Jared Wiley in the later rounds? Larry, you're in luck.
Hey, man, to quote the great DJ Khaled, you smart. So,
Because it's
Garrett
Craig
Wiley,
Sleeper.
TCU 6'6", 249 pounds. Now, if you're in the Discord, I've been talking about Jared Wiley for a bit. There were just some very obvious things that catch your attention about the dude. Again, first of all, he's huge. At least from a height standpoint, he's about 250. So I guess for a 6'6" guy, 250 doesn't look all that big, but still, it's 250 pounds. It is what it is. So he's like the poster boy for rare ability coupled with like unfair overall size. So let me ask you some questions. Can I interest you in a 6'6", 250-pound like runaway Amtrak train in the open field? Does that sound like something that
Yep.
you vibe with? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So he also just so happens to have a wingspan that measures at around like 80 inches. So there's a plus. And then we can tack on like a 37-inch vert and a low 4.6 40 on top of all of that for good measure. So when we're talking about just building a guy out that you could see plugging into this offense to be specifically someone who destroys seams, this is the type of player that you want, because you can high point him in the seam, whether at any point on the field. And particularly once you start talking about in the red area, then he is really dangerous. And he's a very good athlete, not just fast to daylight, but he's also got a little bit of twitch to him. So aside from those like elite 10 and 20 yard splits that he posted at Indy, you can physically see how it translates at the snap. If he gets a free release and you think like a 5-yard cushion is safe just because you don't think a human of that size should be able to threaten you vertically in a hurry, you're wrong, because his strides are so long, they chew up grass and you don't really have a chance to like react. One of the most natural hands catchers in the entire class. Those paws are very strong. Like he'll pluck the ball in contested catch situations and use his length to keep it away after he makes the catch. So for instance, if he doesn't feel comfortable safely tucking it and securing it, and again, in the red zone, it's a big deal. That's a huge advantage that he has there. TCU also didn't use him a ton vertically outside of when they took those shots just outside of the red zone into the end zone, but he was still really fun to watch on like crossers and in breaking routes. He has versatility that he showed on tape to play as an H in the slot and even some in line. He has some solid reps as a run blocker. He's not great there, but he definitely isn't a people mover. But he was not, I'm not going to call him a liability. I didn't see that in the games that I watched. Still wasn't great, though. As far as the areas that he needs to improve in, while he doesn't really shy away from contact, his actual contact balance leaves a lot to be desired. Like there's something really weird about his balance. It's like he's always running over his toes, and it looks like he could fall on his face at any moment. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure why that's the case. Imagine just a very top-heavy person, and they're too heavy for the bottom half, and so they always run with the forward lean. It's kind of him. He looks like he could really trip over his feet at any given moment. Which also kind of leads me to my next issue, his functional strength or lack thereof. Whether we're talking about like the multiple instances of him going down on initial contact or getting rocked in both like pass protection or as a run blocker, I guess what's the easiest way to say it? He ain't dragging enough in his wagon. Okay, like he needs to get some more weight on the lower half, and in this weight program, I'm sure they could take care of that. that's going to be a for sure problem in line, and it'll get exposed at the next level. Teams are probably going to try to be like really physical with him to negate like their proverbial train from gaining steam off the line of scrimmage as a receiver. So unless teams plan on like moving him around, he's really going to have to work to get open off of the line of scrimmage. The route tree was definitely limited, but he also played in the TCU offense that apparently like was very disjointed. And there were a few games where it felt like they were just smacking the random play button on a PS5 controller and rolling with whatever it landed on. It really was no rhyme or reason to the play calling or flow. He's going to need to work on the flexibility like a bunch. Get him into some Pilates classes or something, because he struggles like on the sharper routes. So we're talking, for instance, like outs and curls, routes that require like significant throttling down. For him, it can throw off the timing because it takes him a little while to get off into those. So at this point, I would say he's probably more of an H or a split Y. But if you want to threaten defenses up the seam, like I said before, this is one of those players that's uniquely suited for that role. So with all that being said, still a bit of a project. I have some questions about him as a blocker, and the route tree is not super extensive. So right now I have him with kind of a high to mid 4th round draft grade. I gave him a 67.
Texas didn't help either with Wiley and that route tree.
Yeah. Notice there's a trend there.
Yeah, no kidding. He got buried in that offense with Sanders somehow. Yeah. No, I like him though. I watched Wiley. I could see why you liked him too when you told me. Love the length and the frame, the huge catch radius. That's my favorite. Great athlete. Really good straight line speed. Much better than I expected, because with that frame, it doesn't really feel like it. But and you see that C on his chest too. You could tell he's just one of those captains of the offense. So I like him. I can see why I like him.
I liked him too. I had a 73 on him.
Oh, 72. Yeah, we're even higher than Craig on his own sleeper.
Imagine.
All right, Jamie, finish us off here before we get into our tight end rankings if everybody watched.
All right, so my tight end sleeper is Arizona tight end Tanner McLaughlin. Just a fun watch. He's a guy that watching offensive linemen and secondary players and edge players in the Pac-12, he just kept showing up on tape over and over and over again. So I had to go back and watch him just to watch him. Love the frame at 6'4", 240. Shows a desire, physicality, and effort to be a good blocker. He was actually interesting because I talk all the time about like I want to see guys develop year over year. So I'll watch 1 year and then watch the next year and see if they're fixing things that I thought they needed to work on. What I noticed with McLaughlin was I felt like he improved during the season this year. He improved as a route runner. His blocking improved quite a bit. Just his overall physicality improved. He's effective pulling, climbing on reach blocks, kick out blocks. He flashes the ability to create movement in the run game. Very solid when asked to chip and combo block. He runs an out route, both short, intermediate, and deep, a wheel route, a dig, a curl, and a seam route, a go route up the seam. So not a really diverse route tree, but he runs his routes, the routes that he does run, pretty well. He's very aware as a receiver. He understands when to find space. He works back to the quarterback. So when the quarterback starts to get in trouble, he'll fight back for the football. Turns the face to QB, presents his numbers, provides a big target. High points, everything. Very natural hands catcher with very soft, strong hands. McLaughlin consistently makes catches outside of his frame. Fights for extra yards after the catch. He uses a spin move, a stiff arm, runs through arm tackles, steps through ankle tackles. He just fights for every blade of grass on the field when he has the ball in his hands, which makes him pretty fun to watch. He isn't super explosive, but he has good build-up speed, and he's able to kind of run away from guys at times in open space. Plays through the whistle on every snap, never takes a playoff. And like I mentioned, showed really good growth in all aspects of his game in the second half of 2023. Some issues with him, and I mentioned this to you guys in our text chain, is I feel like he's the kind of guy that Ben Herbert can get his hands on and really kind of mold him. He lacks flexibility in his lower half and core strength. So he's a guy that if you can add some core strength and help him build some flexibility, I think he's going to be really good with the ball in his hands and become a very good route runner. His hand placement as a blocker is a little too far outside, needs some refinement. He's going to need to add some upper body bulk and play strength. McLaughlin's routes tend to be rounded off a bit too much, which provides opportunities for linebackers and secondary players to undercut his routes at times. Like I mentioned, route tree somewhat limited. It's going to need to be developed. His feet will stop as a run blocker at times. He isn't overly twitchy or explosive. Doesn't create a ton of separation. Can sometimes get out of control as a run blocker, but he's a good option in the middle of the field for tight window, contested catches, and he's really good up the seam and just on those in-breaking routes in particular. So I have a 74 on McLaughlin, so kind of a late third, but I think he's a guy who is kind of flying under the radar and offers a lot more than what he's being given credit for. And I think if he gets in the right system, which I think he'd be a great fit for Roman's system, he could be very productive both as a blocker and a receiver.
All right, let's get into these rankings then. We did our sleepers. I guess I'll go ahead and start. Craig, you got your numbers all lined up? You ready?
Yeah, it's working tonight.
Oh, good. All right, I'll start. So I watched 11 guys, and let's see. Let me pull up my list. I just had it, and now it's gone. Okay. Number 11 is AJ Barner, the Michigan tight end, 63. You need a blocking tight end, I guess. He's your guy. Didn't love him. Tip Ryman, same thing. He's the kid out of Illinois, 65, another blocking tight end. I watched Jaheim Bell, the Florida State tight end. I gave him a 66. Dolan Holker, the Colorado State tight end, pretty versatile tight end. He had a 68. That was number 8. Number 7, Jatavion Sanders with a 70. Number 6, Jared Wiley with a 72. Number 5 is Theo Johnson with a 73. I also have Eric All with a 73, which will be number 4. Ben Sinnott with my tight end 3 in this class with a 74. Cade Stover, 75 at number 2. And I've got Brock Bowers at a 91 and my tight end 1. I have no second round grades on any of these tight ends. Craig?
Yep. So I've got 10 guys that I watched. So right there at number 10, got Tip Ryman at a 65. AJ Barner's 66 at number 9. Jared Wiley, who I feel like ought to be higher, but the list panned out. He's at 8 with a 67. Got Tanner McLaughlin at 68 at number 7. Theo Johnson's number 6 on this list with 69. Got Eric All at 5 with the 71. Jatavion Sanders. Number 4, 74. Yuck. Cade Stover at number 3 with the 75. Ben Sinnott at number 2 with the 77. And good old Brock Bowers, number 1, 91. So, yeah, same here. No second round grades on any of these guys. Jamie was really kind.
I watched 8 guys, and my rankings are Eric All was my number 8 with a 63. Jatavion Sanders was my number 7 with a 70. Theo Johnson was my number 6 with a 71. Jared Wiley was my number 5 with a 73. Tanner McLaughlin was my number 4 with a 74. Ben Sinnott was number 3 with an 80. Cade Stover was number 2 with an 82. And Brock Bowers, number 1 with an 88.
Man, this is wild because seeing Sinnott and Stover as 2-3 behind Bowers, who's obviously the consensus tight end 1 in this class. I'm not seeing a lot of Stover or Sinnott. It's all Johnson and Sanders, and we're higher than on those two than Johnson and Sanders. Very interesting.
Yeah, I guess we want to take into consideration like we're not watching full season's worth of tape. I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it.
No, it's just that we're smart, Craig, and we have our own opinion, and everybody else is following the wave.
You said it.
Not us. All right, cool. All right, so we got one more draft podcast left with these draft profiles. It's wide receivers next week, and then we'll get into our mock drafts. But that's it for tight ends. we're okay with Brock Bowers if you trade down, but not at number 5 overall.
Amen.
That'll do it for us. I'm at Garrett Sisti, Jamie at lightning_round, at top_flight. That's FLYT3 for Craig. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.